Okay, friends, so this is the 7th video lecture of Chapter 1. This is the last lecture in the chapter. Let's see, end of the last lecture talking about Vygotsky's theory of cognitive development. We also spoke, 2 videos covered the Pinochet's theory of cognitive development. There is some similarities or some comparison and contrast, I think, worth pointing out to those. Is Pinochet's theory of cognitive development is the idea that children develop simply by being passive absorbers, if you will, of our culture, and Vygotsky's theory of cognitive development really takes into account the role of culture and the role of other people, that our cognitive development is a product of cultural interaction. And again, I'm a sociologist by trade, or by training, so I am leaning more favorably towards Vygotsky's theory. This next theory is also very culturally based. Bronfenbrenner, I believe is the proper pronunciation of his ecological systems theory. If you're familiar with the term ecology is simply it's a textbook term for the environment. You can study ecology, which is usually an environmental term, but you also have something called social ecology, and that's the social environment. If you were to study at K-State and study in their marriage and family program, their specialty is human. Well, actually, the college used to be called human ecology, so the human within the environment. So anyway, his ecological theory is very culturally based. And just like Vygotsky acknowledges the role of the environment, Bronfenbrenner's model takes into the role of the environment at multiple levels. So you have at the center, right? The center of our interest is the individual, is the child, but the child is embedded in all these other layers. So Bronfenbrenner's theory has what he calls these different systems. So you break it down from your microsystem, that's the child or the person, because you can take this theory and apply it to pretty much to anybody, but you have the individual, in this case the child, and all of the people that interact with the child. That is the microsystem. So you're trying to understand development, you're looking at the development of a child, all the people that interact with them. But here's the thing, is that people that interact with them also have relationships. So the next layer out are the people that are not the people who interact with the child, but the relationships between the people that interact with the child. So the teachers and the parents. You have the teachers who interact with the child, the parents that interact with the child, but the relationship between the teachers and the parents. That's the next level out. The next level out is your exosystem, and this is the institutions that the child is associated with, but the institutions that influence the people that influence the child. So if you're talking about child development in the context of a school, you have the child, the teachers, the parents, and the school system that the teachers are a part of, the jobs that the parents happen to work at, the healthcare system that influences the healthcare that the doctors and the nurses that affect the child. So you have the organizations that the people that interact with the child. Then you have the next level out, and this is what we would call the macro system. And the macro system is what's your textbook use? Culture and ideals. So you have the culture and the law that influences the school, that influences the healthcare system, that provides that pays or that establishes the rules, the way the doctors can treat their patients, or the guidelines about what's taught in the schools, or maybe even if the parent is in the military, is the military being deployed, or is the family having to move? So you have all of these layers out. But even further out, and this is one of the things you often, when you read about Bronfenbrenner, that others acknowledge, is it's not only the systems, but it's also the role of time. And I think I just really appreciate this additional element, is that when a child the time in history that the child is living, or that this individual lives is also significant. For instance, we'll just use some really significant differences. A child who happens to be born during the Depression is going to have had different experiences, or a child who is born during COVID, right, is going to have different experiences. So the role of time, the pandemic, the way that time influences all of these other institutions. You could use an example of a small child in the Ukraine in 2022 or 2022, 23, as opposed to a child in Ukraine in 1995, right? The institutions are influenced. All of these other layers have different there are different implications for them depending upon the time and history. Gosh, I hope that makes some sense. I do wish we were together so I could explain some of this. But the point is that when we're trying to understand development, context matters. Context in terms of literally where someone lives, the culture, like literally the neighborhood. This is so sociological. Literally the neighborhood in which somebody lives in, the culture in which somebody lives in, and the time in which somebody lives in. So that is the last theory that is introduced in your child development book. We've really gone over a lot of theory, so let me just real quickly remind both of us what these theories happen to be. We started with Freud, right? Psychosexual. It's all below our awareness, and we talked about another Freudian below our awareness, Erikson. You'll hear more about Erikson and Freud later on. Erikson's theories come up a lot in child development. I actually kind of like Erikson. Then we move to a collection of theorists called behavioralists. You've got Pavlov, he's the dog, slobbery dog, classical condition. Watson, he's also a classical condition. That's little Albert, unethical today. This would probably get him fired. Then you move to Skinner. He's the operant conditioner, punishments. You talk a lot about Skinner if you were going to study the psychology of learning, which is a whole subsection of psychology. Social learning theory, pretty sure, I haven't read all of our textbook yet, but I'm pretty sure we're going to talk more about social learning theory because it's still a behavioral theory, so it's still about what we can observe, but it just makes so much sense, and there's so many great examples in our lived experience. Then we move to two cognitive theorists. Remember, cognitive is about how people think. You got Piaget, he's got the different stages, the schemes, the schemas. Vygotsky is very useful if you're going to be a teacher. There will at some point be a discussion about what we mean by the zone of proximal development, proximal development. This is the gap between what a person knows and what a person is capable of doing, and scaffolding is that guide, is whatever that structure happens to be. And then finally we ended with a big picture. That's a great way to end with a big picture theorist, big picture theory, and that's the ecological systems theory, which really acknowledges all of these other different theories on the individual, but it says, wait, all of those theories, while they may make sense, we cannot forget the big picture, we cannot forget the relationships, we cannot forget when and where we're talking about development. So that wraps up the video lectures for Chapter 1.